AskReddit by Odinson09. What's the most disturbing piece of audio there is? Since other people are mentioning videos with horrible audio, that one of the nightclub burning down. The sounds of people screaming trying to get out of the crush and then burning to death is just awful. The worst parts are 1. At one point someone on fire is seen running out, and 2. How the screaming suddenly stops and it gets eerily quiet. The weepy voiced killer. He killed women, completely mutilated them and proceeded to call the police while crying about what happened and how he can't stop himself. Then he'd hang up and do it again. Did they catch him? The Ruth Price 911 call where she's this old woman living alone in her apartment when some stranger keeps trying to get in. He eventually does and then she can be heard screaming for her life. I think he was stabbing her. Fortunately, she survived and lived another 14 years. Pretty sure it was used to train dispatch in the past for how horrific the audio is. If I remember correctly, in reality the killer was some guy who tried to choke her but she was able to fight them off. The 911 call from one of the teachers present at the Columbine school shooting. You can hear the gunshots and the gunman cheering and whooping. You also hear when they enter the library, which is where they killed the most students. It's chilling. My high school girlfriend's sister was a student at Columbine at the time. She survived simply because another person died very close to her and the gunman thought he got them both. Her stories were beyond description of sadness and agony. She is mostly okay today, from what I understand, but it took a long time to get there. A 911 call of a little girl who had just found her brother in his room after he committed suicide. The most heartbreaking part is when she screams, "Why did you do it?" Honestly, stuff like that is what kept me from going through with anything when I had those thoughts. I didn't want my family to go through that. The woman who helped build a case against Jared from Subway by recording him talking about his enjoyment of pedophilia. Listening to a couple minutes of him describing what he's done made me want to vomit. The process of getting this stuff on tape wrecked the woman's mental health, and it's easy to see why. That documentary was tough to get through. That woman proves how unstoppable a mom protecting children can be. Absolutely disgusting things, and she pushed through to help get the arrest made. True hero. I'm sure others have mentioned it, but one that really, truly upset me was when a poor delivery lady had mistakenly driven into floodwaters. She called 911 and the dispatcher was cruel beyond words. I'll never forget it. This one came to mind. Also the 911 call of the little girl trying to get help for her mom who was stabbed, shot, and the dispatcher is like, annoyed with the kid and keeps asking her to put her mother on the phone. The 911 call of the lady stuck in her car in a flood and the operator is so unhelpful, she ends up drowning on the other end of the phone. If it's the same incident I'm thinking of, that happened near where I used to live. That 911 operator was not only unhelpful, she took her damn time sending anyone out to help the driver. And instead of being fired or charged with anything, she was allowed to retire and the county just kind of hand waved it away, saying there was nothing they could do because she'd already retired. That 911 call from the guy trapped in one of the Twin Towers. Any of the Twin Towers recordings. The 9/11 museum does such a good job with them. The cult leader from the documentary Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, where he records his rape of a young girl in his secret room in which only the most devout followers are allowed. It's haunting. Well, I'm taking this out of my Netflix queue. The 911 call of the woman whose chimp was eating her friend's face. Travis the monkey. My GF is obsessed with this story and it's actually nuts. He was often given Xanax in his morning tea to help calm him as he was naturally very agitated towards anyone who wasn't his owner, and on the day of the incident he saw his owner's friend remove her glasses and put her hair up, and that triggered him to go into a drug-fused rage where he didn't register pain or respond to his owner for a pretty big chunk of time due to the Xanax. He degloved the victim, as well as tore off her nose and ears and parts of her cheeks. Fucking terrible, all while his owner stabbed and beat him repeatedly. On top of being stabbed multiple times, he was also shot up to 15 times during the actual incident by cops and did not die till hours after the drugs from his tea wore off. Initially, officers thought that the 911 call was a prank call too, so they hesitated on dispatching officers until other neighbors called as well. For me personally, it's audio and video. It's a grandmother who killed her son-in-law. And for some reason the police bring in the woman's young granddaughter, daughter of the victim. And the grandmother is insane and asks for a hug, and the little girl screams, "No, you killed me, daddy." I honestly have no idea why the police brought in the girl. It's horrible. The 911 call from the attack of Travis the chimpanzee. Travis' screams can be heard in the background at the start of the tape as Harold, owner of Travis, pleads for the police, who initially believed the call to be a hoax until she said, "He's eating her." Remind me of a news story I had read. A teen went camping with her father, or stepfather, and they were attacked by a bear and her cubs. The bear left and came back while the teen was on the phone with her mom. The teen at one point said, "Mom, they're eating me." I cannot imagine how awful that must have been. Jared from Subway talking about how he likes kids who come from bad homes because they are easier to manipulate into having sex. Don't listen to it. I still find his whole story bizarre. Middle class fat dude loses a bunch of weight eating Subway subs. Subway throws money at him as part of some health campaign. Skinny dude uses money to live out some crazy pedophile fantasies for years until it catches up with him. The Apollo 1 crew. Those guys were the coolest, calmest, most extensively well-trained former combat test fighter pilots in the world, and all they could do was scream. That audio kept me up the night I heard it the first time. This one is accompanied by video, but the reaction of a man whose wife gets killed when a brick flies off the back of a truck they were driving behind on a highway and came through their windshield. The audio was captured by their dash cam, one of those things you can't unhear. Yeah, this one is just straight depressing. Extreme raw emotion of a sudden and violent loss of life. I can't even begin to imagine how traumatizing that is. The 911 call Jennifer Pan made after she hired people to try and kill her parents. At one point her surviving father starts shouting and yelling in the background. This is after he had been shot multiple times, I think one of which may have been to his head or neck. When I tell you that I can still hear her father's screams, I mean it. It might not be the worst thing on here, but it's fucking harrowing. I unknowingly met her once years ago, while she was, and still is, in prison. I was a part of a group that did a course with some of the inmates. She just went by Jenny, and although I knew about the case, I didn't put two and two together. I just thought, wow, she seems really nice. Wonder what she did to get in here. Our instructor told us not to research any of them until the course was complete. I looked them all up immediately after the course finished and almost threw up. I'm still shook. One time in the classroom she came up and tickled my sides. It makes me sick just thinking about it. Jim Jones talking into a microphone while his followers poison their children. What made the death tape even more haunting was that because the tape had been used so many times to record stuff, faint backward music is barely audible while Jones speaks from the back tape. I'd venture that the Toolbox killer's audio recording of them torturing and raping Shirley Ledford is probably pretty high up on the list. It has never been released to the public or leaked, but there does exist the full transcript online. Just in general, I'd add the Toolbox killer welcome message tape. Basically telling the women they kidnapped that they were chosen because they were young and hot, there was no way to escape, and they would be drugged and raped endlessly until David Ray Parker was bored of them. Then their memory would be erased and they would be released. Accompanied by video, but a lot of the school children who drowned on the MV Sewell recorded short video clips as the ship was sinking. Hearing the crew telling the students over loudspeaker to stay in place and stay on board is absolutely chilling. The children make snide remarks about how crazy it is to stay on board with the ship listing so far, but they remain in place. One of them literally jokes this is the part where they tell us everything's fine and we should stay put while they run for their lives, so fucked up that that's exactly what was happening. The voicemail: my stepfather left my mom the morning of 9/11. He worked on the 99th floor and called to tell us he was okay and was making his way down the stairs. He said he would call us again when he was outside. He never did. In the call, you can hear him telling others to keep their heads down, out of the smoke, but what really makes the audio as disturbing as it is the screaming. The screams in the background are some of the most bone-chillingly real terror I think I've ever heard. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. The mom screaming her heart out when she walks in on her son who just blasted his face off with a shotgun. It's from the 4chan kid suicide video years ago. Yeah, the gore was pretty intense, but it was so quick you don't really process it. Then his mom comes home with his little sisters and it's the worst piece of audio I have heard. Fucked me up for a good while and got me to stop being so morbidly curious because there are some things we just shouldn't see or hear willingly. My oldest brother was murdered 22 years ago, and I can still hear the scream my mom let out when she found out. It's a sound like no other. The guy whose scuba kit fucked up and he sunk a few hundred feet and couldn't rise again and you could just hear the muffled screaming noises under his mask. Edit: he died on the bottom of the sea and his kit was recovered with the audio and body a while after. Source for those interested: https://yahoo.be/crj0lim/mmgs. Another haunting one is the story of Dave Shaw, who was diving to recover the body of Dion Dreyer. The video is available and there is a moment when the corpse is directly facing Dave, him basically looking death in the eyes. Well, he succeeded in recovering the body. In fact, thanks to him they also recovered his body. He died before he could surface, but they managed to haul both of them up because he was successful at running a line to himself and Dion. https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/Dave_Shaw. That girl who called her mom as she was being eaten by a bear. Edit: the girl's name was Olga Moskalyova. A few people have said it was a hoax, however I have been unable to find any evidence that it is, in fact, a hoax. Although hopefully it was. No one should die like that and no one should hear their child die like that. I remember that from a long time ago. Was in Russia and she was like, it doesn't hurt anymore halfway through it if I remember correctly. The Golden State Killer phone tapes where he calls his victims 4 years after the crimes to taunt them always gives me chills. Even more terrifying is people who received those calls could sometimes hear children on the other side of the phone, meaning the supposed killer taunting them was around children. Now that he's caught, it's crazy to think those were probably his kids or grandkids. There was a teenage boy who drove a minivan. He somehow became wedged in one of the folding chairs but was able to call for help as he slowly suffocated to death. He said something along the lines of, "I can barely breathe. I think I'm gonna die here." It's heart-wrenching to know that audio exists and no one was able to find him in time. The minivan was in his school parking lot overnight. Edit to at, his name was Kyle Plush. Text equals Kyle %20 Plush %20 died %20 after %20 his by %20 voice %2 activating %20 his %20 iPhone. This happened in 2018. He was 16 years old. Someone mentioned Plush and the 911 operator had a hard time understanding one another. However, in the audio it's clear what he said for the most part. Cincinnati PD was sued and they updated their systems because he would have been saved had the 911 operator relayed the information she was given to the officers who were on site while Plush spoke with her. His quote was actually, "I probably don't have much time left, so tell my mom I love her if I die." His body was found 6 hours later by his father at 9 p.m. By all accounts, it's the Norris and Whitaker tapes, otherwise known as the Toolbox killers. I've seen a transcript. Deeply unpleasant stuff. Curious of me wants to read it, but the same part in me is saying I'll regret it. The audio of the huge dairy farm that caught fire in Texas is fucking haunting. 18,000 cows crammed into a warehouse and burning alive. I once had to disconnect the electrical supply of a large farm shed that had collapsed due to snow. The shed had been filled with 150 plus sheep. People laugh when I tell them about it, but it was fucking horrible hearing them in pain. I'd imagine the tape of 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey's rape and murder made by the Moore's murderers. https://em.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/Moore's_murders would be a contender. It's never been released thankfully, though I've seen plenty of interviews with the policemen who had to listen to tape, and you can just see on their faces how much it affected them. This is a minor one, but it messed with me. It was a UFO documentary on TV in about 1995. There's a bit where the woman being abducted puts out a tape recorder in her room all night and captures a male voice saying, "Don't wake up." So that, in itself, was really scary. But all I could think of was that this was a rape about to happen, and the poor woman was using UFO stuff as a cover to protect her sanity. And that just rocked me. And if someone in law enforcement heard it, wouldn't they feel the same? The whole thing was just hard to process. Reminds me of women talking and the actual case it was based on. A Mennonite community where women and little girls would wake up in the morning to find themselves bruised and bleeding. The leader of the colony said that it was the devil, a demon, visiting these women at night, and that they'd invited it in by sinning. Until one woman stayed up night after night, until someone tried to break in through her window, and she attacked him. The women discovered that multiple men in the village were breaking in and using belladonna spray to incapacitate the women before raping them.